When it comes to damage factors and dealing overall DPS, Nika is certainly up there. While she is an infantry commander, she still has some of the highest damage factors in the game. So stick around in this video as we'll be going through her skills, her talents, her builds, and her pairings, and so much more. What is up, guys? MEOWER here, back with a brand new Call of Dragons video. In continuation of the Commander series revamp, we'll be visiting Nika. As for Nika, we'll be discussing her skills, her talents, her builds, and her pairings, and so much more. So, without further ado, let's get started. And don't forget, if you like content like this, please drop a like and don't forget to subscribe. Starting off, we'll be visiting Nika's skills. She has some of the highest damage or DPS potential of most commanders, even though she's an infantry commander, and I will tell you why shortly. Starting off, her main skill, which is the ranged skill called Shimmer Strike, Nika deals physical damage factor by 1,500, one of the highest damage factors in Call of Dragons right now, and she reduces their HP by 30%, which is a major debuff and probably the only one of its kind. I don't think any other commander has the access to the bruise debuff, which is pretty massive considering that you cut the enemy's HP by 30% for 3 seconds, which is humongous. Her second skill, not that great, pretty useless. She just does more damage to darklings and dark creatures, pretty useless. Her third skill, all infantry gain march speed, which is pretty nice, and they gain physical attack, which is decent. We don't really want that much attack on infantry since the entire point of infantry is to be a damage sponge, but the attack is welcome nonetheless. And her fourth skill, sorry, increases her hero skill damage by 10% and increases the counterattack damage by 20%. Do note that infantry's counterattack damage starts off as half, so you're starting off at 50% counterattack damage, and with the skill makes it so you are dealing a total of 70% counterattack, which is always nice because as infantry you do get attacked a lot, and that is the same case for cavalry because all melee units in Call of Dragons deal half of the original counterattack. And finally, her awakened skill, Total Slaughter. Nika pretty much has an execute, which occurs at a 50% chance every 2 seconds when the enemy has less than 50% unit remaining, with a pretty significant damage factor, 500. Pretty great kit overall. I like her a lot. Next up, her talents and her builds. Now, Nika mostly has two viable builds. I will show them to you. We won't really use the peacekeeping tree at all because it is a waste on a commander of her caliber. Starting off, her first build, which will be a glass cannon build for fun. We'll be running overall attack, we'll be running defense, and we'll be running HP, the standard for any infantry build. And of course, we're going to be using the skill tree as our base. Starting off, we'll be running attack, the usual. We'll be running intimidation to make her damage skill even hit harder. And then we're going to run high spirits, which is decent. Your second option will be last word. So it will be boiled down to your choice. Either you want last word or you want high spirits. Personally, I prefer high spirits. And then we're going to run Spirit of Rage since there's not really any other commander that you can run this build with, except for maybe Bakar, but the extra 8% is not that great on Bakar because his damage factor is pretty low, so you're kind of wasting that, and you might as well just make use of the extra rage cycling. Next up, you're either going to go for Detached, but I would prefer you go for Unquenchable Will just to mitigate the enemy's HP. Next up, if you want to go all the way for the extra steady hands, which is nice, you can go for it by running either Noble Contract if you plan on running Madeline Secondary, or you can run Egoism because the extra tankiness is pretty nice. Personally, however, I do prefer you go for the crit build because when you go for the crit build, you have the potential to pull off some very juicy damages when it comes to critting. And finally, either you go Thirst for Blood or Cage Animal. However, since you are an infantry march, I would much prefer you go Thirst for Blood because you're not going to last that long in order to maximize the value of Cage Animal. That is it for the skill part. Next up, the infantry tree. We're going to go for defense. We're going to go for 3 points in intimidation for the extra damage. And then we're going to go for 2 points in infantry speed just to get that extra 6% bonus where you would have normally gotten from overall speed. And then finally, we're going to go for an extra normal attack damage here. And we're going to put that last point in Assassins in Waiting just so you can run away quick enough. And then finally, we're going to go for Furious just to maximize that attack. And for your last point, I would recommend you max out Adrenaline Rush. This is the Nika Glass Cannon build. Of course, you can also place your last point either in Encouraging Dance or in Steady Hands if you wish. Personally, I just prefer you go for finishing Adrenaline Rush because normal attack damage does also impact counterattack and your regular attack, which is pretty nice. However, if you do, you can always go for Steady Hands instead. And then the standard Nika build, which will be using the infantry tree as your primary, we're going to be running overall attack, we're going to be running overall defense, and then overall HP. We'll be using the infantry as the primary, and we'll be using the skill tree as the secondary. We'll be running, again, 2 points in infantry speed, and then 3 points in intimidation just to make use of it. But here we're going to go all the way into Adrenaline Rush. We're going to go for the cool-headed. You can either go for close quarters combat to increase your march speed just to get in and drop that skill damage as much as possible or tank in. However, I do prefer you go for the more damage to cavalry units because if you do manage to intercept any cavalry marches, you will wipe them out. Or you can go for all conquering. Both all conquering and cavalry counter tactics are completely up to you. All conquering makes you a more versatile overall commander that you can just dive in, and cavalry counterattacks makes it so you use this build as a defensive march in order to counter any cavalry that is flanking your marches. The next tree, you have an option for Generalist. Always go for Generalist, one of the overall best talents because it not only provides attack and defense, it also gives you vigor, which gives you overall more HP, and 5% for 1 second is pretty great because it has no cooldown. So essentially, if you're lucky, you can pull it off for multiple times over time, and 1 turn equals 1 second anyways, which is pretty nice. And then finally, we're going to go for Encouraging Dance just because you're an infantry march, you're going to be hit a lot. You will need it. You don't need solid shield, and you don't need flank protection. And then finally, for the last talent, we will go for either Iron Wind or Ready for Battle. However, I do prefer Iron Wind because any buff you do receive through your rage skills or whether if it's from your primary or your secondary, but in Nika's case, it will definitely come from your secondary, is increased by 1 second, which is pretty amazing and pretty valuable. Next up, we're going to be running the skill tree as the secondary tree. We're going to be running Intimidation next, and then we're going to be running Conquering though this time. We're not going to be run High Spirits because you want to be a little more tanky side, and then you want to deal as much skill damage as possible while relying that skill damage on your damage source. And then finally, for the last point, you can either put it into Flank Protection, you can put it into Rectification just for the extra heal, which is pretty nice, or you can put it in One More Last Word to get that extra counterattack, but we will throw it here in Rectification because the extra heal can go a long way to add up. And that is it when it comes to Nika's talents. As for Nika's pairings, we've said it in the Madeline video. Madeline Nika, the best infantry march by far. Nothing ever come close to it. However, since this is a Nika video, I will be telling you what pairings you can run with her. You can always run Nika Garwood for a pseudo-tanky rage cycling build. Usually, if you're going to run Nika Garwood, I would recommend you run the skill tree primary because you will make use of the extra sustain power provides, so you'll be able to keep your marchers topped off. And of course, Nika Bakar. Bakar is pretty much an epic version of Nika because he also shares an execute once you have him awakened. So both of them deal a lot of damage over time. Definitely run them both if you're going to run the skill tree build. And of course, you can run Nika Madeline, Nika primary, and Madeline secondary. But if you're going to run Nika primary, definitely run the infantry primary. The second build with the infantry talents to be primary. That is it when it comes to Nika's pairings. Next up, we'll be discussing where you can obtain her shards. As for Nika, Nika is a gold key commander, so you can definitely get her from the gold key, from the gold chest. She pops up in the daily deals. You can get her from there. And of course, you can get her from the VIP daily login, or you can exchange her for universal tokens. That is it when it comes to Nika and everything that you need to know about her and her guide. If you like this video, please drop a like. Don't forget to subscribe and keep an eye out for future videos in the Commander series Revamped. And I will see you in the next video. Meow meow.